Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Mesa City Council study session for the morning of Thursday, March 28th. Vice Mayor Heredia is unable to attend this morning and is excused, but all the rest of our council are present. Item 1 on our agenda for this meeting is to review the agenda we have for our Monday, April 1st meeting. So, council, please refer to that document. Mr. Brady, do you know if you have any, well, I'm sure you know, are there any... Are there any anything interesting in this document at all, Mr. Brady?
In previous study sessions, we've covered some of the items on here, such as the incubator and the library are on here. We're excited to move forward with the next 2 fire stations that are on here.
I saw that.
That's exciting for us to move forward, both 223 and 224. Land that we already own, but we're moving forward with the design and pre-construction services. So we've already identified the contractors. We need to get them on board to work with the design teams to get those further along. I think, Mayor, there might be some interest in just a highlight.
Yes, thank you.
The heat relief program we have going on.
Yes, thank you. Council, yesterday I attended a MAG meeting, and one of the presentations was on heat relief during the summer. And so, and it was a very sobering presentation. In Maricopa County last year, 645 heat-related deaths. That's staggering to me. And the other thing that was staggering to me was that we know who the people are, we know where they're going to die, we know when they're going to die. So it's kind of like a scheduled train wreck. You know, it seems like we could send the ambulances and just wait for this to happen. So here's what, of the 645 people that died in Maricopa County, this is in July and August primarily. 404 in July, 145 in August. So 549 of the 645 is July and August. So we know if we just focus our efforts on helping people with heat relief during those 2 months alone, you know, nearly most of this is taken care of. We know where they die as well. Over 60% of the folks that I just described are not homeless. They're living in trailer parks. Now that's not to say 40% are homeless, so we also know that homeless encampments and where homeless people congregate is also where we can find these people. So we know where, we know who. The WHO is 50 years and older with underlying health conditions. So if you know, again, we know what population to target with assistance. So to me, anyway, it was just, we've got to step up and address this. I mean, some of the things that we do in this room are life and death, and this is one of those things. So I was very pleased to see, now the county is stepping up, and so the agenda item for Monday, which I'm 100% in support of, is partnering with the county to accept funding to provide some respite and heat relief, and we need to do that. And so I'm anxious to learn more about what this agreement is that we have with the county. So maybe Ruth, I know this is in your purview, so thank you. I'm just anxious to learn more about this, but then I'm anxious to know what more we can do to address what we know is going to be another deadly summer in our community.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Ruth Giese, Community Services Director. Thank you for showing your support and learning more about it at MAG. You are correct, Mayor. We were able to get some additional statistics about heat-related deaths last year. It was actually a 50% increase from the year before. So we're seeing that every year, not necessarily, we hope there won't be an increase this year. We hope that we're trying to get in front of it with some of these programs. Our interdepartmental group that we have related to homelessness is really, we all work together, meet regularly to try and get ahead of this. And we hope that this similar day respite center, with your approval to have this intergovernmental agreement with the county, we can continue to have our partners in the community continue to provide services and try and get better and better every year. So we partnered actually with the county and the Resurrection Street Ministries last year. So we did this very similar program last year. We believe it was a success. We were able to serve over 7,800 individuals during that time. And this is not just a day respite center. We also have other cooling stations throughout the city that we provide, information on. We'll start providing that information about where people can go when the summer months approach. The last year, we found that the location was ideal. It is near light rail access. We found afterwards in working with our public safety that there was a low impact to the surrounding area. We work really hard to have people move along once the day respite center is about to close. We had Monday through Saturday and Sunday hours last year. We've changed that a little bit for our plan for this year on our next slide, but we did, we felt that it was a success. So for the coming year, we would still accept ARPA funding from the county, and the amount is $235,000, a little bit over that. It would still be a day respite center at Resurrection Street Ministries. The county is also adding some additional services. For example, they will have a bilingual call center and transportation assistance at no cost. And we are working with the county on coordinated marketing and outreach to the community. We'll get ahead of that early. The IGA does not include funding for security and program administration, so that would be paid for with general funds. The respite center, we're planning on, the nonprofit, in working with them in a coordinated effort, we found that Monday through Saturday hours would work well, starting a little bit later so that they can get everything ready. With Sundays closed, the nonprofit, we want to make sure that they get a day off and are able to, get their supplies ready and get everything ready, have also a day of respite for those folks that work there. They work very hard. But we do know of other areas where folks can go. Sure. There's the map. So we have a heat relief map that we put together, and this will be available on our website and in other areas. And so we do have other areas that folks can go to in Mesa on a Sunday as well, and also later in the evening, depending on what the needs are in the community. But as you can see here, we have hydration stations at St. Paul's and at Paz. And Paz is open on Sundays, so people could go there, especially in the later afternoon when it's the warmest. The Salvation Army also provides services specifically on heat advisory days. And Mesa Can also offers a cooling center as well as United Food Bank.
So Mayor, you can tell, like many of our outreach services are very concentrated in one part of the city. So in the future, we need to have a couple of things we have to accomplish. One, we need to either grow or grow the existing nonprofits' capacity, or find other nonprofits who can help us take on this responsibility. And we really need to transition, or I don't know, transition, right word. We need to expand to the east because we certainly have challenges in that direction also, especially with, as you said, mobile homes along Main Street and other places. We have a huge concentration of those. So that's just something we have to keep in mind for the future.
Thank you. Council, questions on this? Mr. Freeman.
Yeah, I have one. So we've identified a population that's very acceptable or has heat problems with this population. and you're talking trailer parks, you're talking 50-plus. How does an individual receive care or help if we're at a trailer park and their air conditioning fails, and just the response we have for that type of person or individual or even family?
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Freeman. We work with our public safety, our fire. We also have street navigators, not we, but our partners are out. And so we could have them arrive at a location if we get a call through our hotline. Obviously, in that situation, it would be more of a 911 call, I think, and then we could work with the families and even work with our emergency rehab program if there was something happening with the actual unit at a
Ruth,
mobile.
talk a little bit more about that, because that is really we've been spending a lot more resources in those programs. Talk about how that program works.
Yes, thank you. So our emergency rehab program over the last couple of years has grown exponentially because we are finding that as folks are in need of anything to do with emergencies, whether that be a HVAC system, it might be a roof leak, it might be windows that no longer are able to insulate. It could be a number of things. Also very much related to our disability community. So if a person no longer can use the bathroom that they have, we can retrofit that. But what's wonderful about this program is we can quickly, the funds are available immediately to offer services. Obviously, there's a lot of folks calling, and so we try and get to them as quickly as possible. If it was a life-threatening thing, we would be working with our other partners in public safety, of course, to make sure that they were in a safe place while we made these
And Ruth, we
improvements
added
as well.
significant, I think council just approved, we increased that budget quite a bit this past year, right?
Yes, we are adding additional funding. In fact, we were able to move some funding recently that you approved. We were able to move another $1 million because we're going through it. Our team is able to spend these funds pretty quickly because it is considered emergency funding. And we've added more funding to it for the next funding year as well. We are very excited that we're able to serve so many in such a impactful manner.
I guess one of my thoughts is since we have some aging trailer parks in our community, we have some aging, even apartment complexes that may have some failure in their air conditioning systems, that we do outreach today because summer's upon us for the future. And how do we do that? And in collaboration with our other partners in that. So I guess my question is about the transportation component, because some people may not have transportation to get to the cooling center. So how is that driven? And then the opportunity for people to maybe replace their air conditioning units and have a contractor come in and do that for them, because I'm assuming they probably don't have the capacity to do it themselves. But how does that work? I know we have a system for that.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Freeman, our street navigation folks that are out there, they actually have their own vans that if there was an emergency, they could be called and actually transport somebody to a cool, safe location. But we also have, the county is also incorporating a new service this year that you can call and get transportation for free. So we will be including that in all our marketing. We also work very closely with our first responders here at the city, and they know our phone numbers, they know the hotlines. We'll make sure that they know exactly where everything is. Last year, it worked really well. We all knew, we were all giving, even the park rangers, everybody was working together to make sure that we got folks to the right place. There are other services, obviously, through our other contracts. For example, CBI, they have their own shelters throughout the valley in an emergency where we could get people housed. And then we could step in on the rehab side, get the home secured and safe, and then people could move back in. The other thing is, I love that idea of doing preventative outreach and getting ahead of it and letting people know that if you need service or if you haven't checked your HVAC recently, that you might want to do so and maybe get on the list with our program.
Yeah, the only thing I was thinking, there's no overnight stays, obviously, because even in the heat of the summer, some homes are, 95 to 100 degrees inside a home, and that's very hard on our bodies. So I guess overnight stays somewhere would be needed for some people as well, or is that not happening?
Well, I don't know today how that would work, but I'm sure that if we worked with Salvation Army and our other partners, they also have programs where they could have emergency housing
I mean,
in that instance.
if we had room in our Off the Streets program, we could put them in the hotels.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
I would rather see that as an option for some elderly care if by chance their air conditioning has failed. There's no purpose in sending them back to 95 degree or 100 degree trailer or
Yes,
apartment.
absolutely.
That's all
I agree.
I don't
yes.
want to hijack the conversation.
No, I appreciate the great questions. Ms. Pillsbury?
I had a lot of the same questions, Mark, so thank you for those. And Mayor, I was curious, when they went through all those deaths, did they show you a map of where all the deaths occurred?
They didn't, and this is the question I was going to ask, is we're putting forth a great, good faith effort on this, so I don't want any spirit of criticism here. Everyone who's involved in this is very passionate, and I appreciate that we're making improvements in this. The rehab dollars, additional rehab dollars that we allocated, I think can be extremely significant in this, but I am a little frustrated just because the data is not very specific. We get these big numbers, but I'm curious to know if we can say, well, I mean, where we have literal hot spots, no pun intended, in Mesa, where we know that trailer park we need to go knock on doors in that trailer park because we can just predict that something bad's going to happen there. And it's probably not just one, right? And then, where are the encampments where we know that we need to be proactive and say, you guys, for the next few weeks, it's life-threatening for you to be outside and be in this location. So we need to make sure you know that there's transportation to these respite centers. The fact that we have daytime respite, I think, is very important. But to Mr. Freeman's point, is there a need for us to find some nighttime respite? Because we know people will, maybe it's the cumulative effect of being outside overnight is going to catch up with them and eventually cause their demise.
And I'm guessing if they pass away undetected in their home, they weren't in a position to get to a cooling center during the day, right? So, and I do have a lot of aging trailer parks throughout my district going east. And so that's why I would be curious to see a map, or, I mean, I'm sure that number is spread across Maricopa County, but I just would like to see where.
Yeah.
We can ask the
Where
county,
they
I mean,
are.
I had the same presentation with Dr. Sonnenschein, and they didn't offer to provide it broken down by cities, but I guess we could ask and see. I don't know. The county has it.
I would think
Yeah.
they would. I mean, obviously, we need to take care of our people no matter what, because we would want to prevent any future deaths from happening. So I'm not saying that necessarily would change what we decide to do, but I would also agree that we need to.
We
be
can work
more
with the county to see if
proactive.
we can get more of that information.
Great.
Mr. Summers?
I saw Mary back there. I'm just wondering if our data from our EPCRs would be able to provide us with some kind of snapshot for that. Because we get dispatched on heat-related emergencies all the time, and the outcomes are there. Is that something that we could pull out of the data? Police could, yeah. Firemen.
Mayor, Councilmember Summers, this is something we're working on today. Right now, heat-related, there's many things that fall into heat-related injuries or heat-related calls. So we are trying to zero in on, so we can just plug in something in the data to get how many calls we get related to heat. Like right now, if someone's dizzy or passes out, all these things could mean heat, but they don't come in as heat-related sometimes when it's initially dispatched. But we are working on that today to see if we can zero in.
So we'll have
on that.
another avenue, I think, in the future,
Right.
pulling our own local data. We'll be able to.
And can I say, this past week, one of the things I attended was a senior expo out at the Multi-Gen Center, and I had some amazing conversations with Mary's social workers who full-time, they're dealing with this population in these locations, and they're doing an amazing job. I'm just saying, so again, I want to be complimentary of the efforts that we're putting into this, but 645
Yeah.
is not an acceptable number.
It's a lot, but,
Yeah.
you know, what I'm encouraged by are continuing investments in in the data particularly that we're utilizing, because we know, for example, homelessness, cardiovascular disease, those kind of age, as we mentioned before, are related to, and poverty, are related to a higher likelihood of dying by heat-related illness. So as our data gets better, this can inform our proactive outreach, so that we would be able to say we know people in the system who who meet all these factors, and have perhaps fire and others reach out to them to make sure, hey, is your AC working this year? If not, we can get them connected to the programs that we have. So hopefully this is only a couple years out, but this is a direction we need to continue to go. So thank you, Mary. I know she didn't expect to be called up
That's okay.
today.
Thank you.
So, Mayor and Council, and I think certainly it helps that we can fix the units and keep people in their homes, but the reality is we do not have capacity to do overnight stays for most of these people. It doesn't exist. And as difficult it was to make the decision to purchase a hotel, we're coming up against a lot of static about even using hotel rooms to put up people. So at some point, the city or the state or the county, we've got to figure this out, because we need more capacity. And the challenge is we need more capacity within the nonprofits to assist us with making that happen. This is not it's difficult for the city to stand these, to operate and oversee these. So we rely significantly on navigators and other nonprofits, and they're struggling right now, right? You can talk to New Leaf. Candace and I met with Save the Family. They're all very much struggling, and part of it is not only just funding, but just the kind of a community perception of, well, that's great, let's provide heat relief, but not anywhere near where I live. And we've got to figure this out, because it's not going to get easier. And I would say the mobile home parks we have in Mesa are not getting better, right? And it's not just heat, it's just living conditions. And so that's a reality we're going to have to deal with in the not too distant future.
Thank you. Council, other questions on this? So I'm excited that this is on our consent agenda for Monday, and thank you to Maricopa County for stepping up and providing some funds and some leadership on this. But I do think we need to do a deeper dive in Mesa and see, is there data that we can use to park the relief where
We'll
it
see
needs
where
to be.
we can identify that, yeah.
Yes, Ms.
I
Pillsbury.
just was thinking, all of these parks that I go to and attend, they all have communities, like HOA communities, or, so maybe we just need to work with them on getting mobilized of doing house checks or doing, I don't know, so that they can be looking out and maybe catch something too and maybe you're already doing that, but I just think that would be a good idea to use who's already at a lot of these properties and locations to do a better job. Because so many, like I was just at one on Monday, they have 3,000 residents there, and then they go down to 300. So it's a huge, huge property, and how would they know whether someone's in the house or whether they left? So maybe we work with them on figuring out a system of how they check who's there and how they're doing and what their property's like or whatever. So I don't know, that's just an idea.
That's a great idea. I think, again, it's the sad thing is we can predict where this is going to happen, and we need to be knocking on those doors and checking their facilities, right? So, Mr. Brady, if you don't mind, I'm going to suggest that number one, let's maybe we take this off the consent agenda for Monday just to do a little PSA over it and to say thank you, Maricopa County, and if you're aware of any, grandmas or neighbors or please, let's please help raise awareness of what the assistance is that's there. But then also, if staff could come back to us in a few weeks and saying, well, Maricopa County did help us break down these numbers, or not, it might be good. We only have here a small window, a couple of months before this is going to be upon us, and it might be good to be better aware of the challenge. Yes, Ruth, thank you. Why don't you do maybe
She could just provide, this
share-
map probably.
share this again, yes.
And the rehab, maybe that we should add the rehab program too.
I will also have the
Yeah.
rehab program, yes.
Yeah, so we may need to, we'll just have to work on the agenda, because it'll be
Okay.
different than this.
Great.
And I appreciate all the wonderful ideas this morning.
Thank you, Ruth. All right, thanks. Council, other questions regarding Monday's agenda?
Mayor, if I may, I
Please.
just want to, because Mr. Brady did a fine job pointing out the 2 new fire stations that are going under contract. I just wanted to pull a note that 4B is for Gateway Library, so that's created a lot of excitement in my community, so I just wanted to highlight that the contract is, one of the contracts being approved on Monday. And we can keep it on consent.
Thank you. Yeah, we had great presentations at our last study session on that project. Ms. Duff?
Mayor, I'm interested in learning more about 4F, the street light monitoring system and the dimming, how that's going to work. I have neighborhoods who complain it's too bright, and I've been told there's nothing we can do, but maybe there is.
I think RJ knows the answer to that question.
Mayor, members of the council, good morning. RJ Zeter with the Transportation Department. Councilmember Duff, this is a continuation of the upgrade or the conversion of our current high-pressure sodium lights to LED. And this is specifically the monitoring technology that we use that goes with the new light fixtures. So the system does allow for dimming. You may recall that several years ago, the council approved a streetlight master plan. So in your district in particular, I don't think we're doing much dimming. What we can do is install shields, either on the front of the lights if they're in medians, or on the back of the lights if they're behind someone's home. So if you have a location, I'd be happy to have our staff, take a look. The number of complaints that we've gotten since we kind of created our own shield design has gone down dramatically. So it's an interesting discussion because in some parts of the city, any light is too much light. And in other parts of the city, we can't give people enough light. It's very location specific. So, but I'd be happy to work with you on a specific concern.
So this system, does it work in just sections of the city? I just don't understand the-
As we convert the existing high-pressure sodium lights to LED, they go together. So the current lights, the old technology cannot be dimmed and cannot be monitored to see if it's working. So there's 2 pieces to the conversion. One is installing the new fixture. The new fixture has the capacity to be monitored remotely and potentially dimmed.
So it's the fixture itself and not necessarily the bulb or whatever the light.
Well, the fixture and the light, they're integrated. So like I said, the old technology, we couldn't do anything with. It's just on or off,
Right.
The new technology, we have the ability to dim lights. So specifically, I'm thinking of areas within Councilmember Goforth's district and Councilmember Freeman that, we have the ability in the overnight hours where we did a study on, with traffic, and we worked with fire and police, and we found that we weren't going to be impacting vehicle safety, motoring safety by dimming the lights. But in other parts of the city, we decided to, keep them at a constant level all night long. So, like I said, if you have a specific location or areas where you're getting concerns, we'd be
So if
happy.
it's an old fixture with an LED light, does that work?
So
The system?
I apologize if I'm not being clear. So imagine the old system, we had 40,000 high-pressure sodium light fixtures, and they were
Okay.
just on or off. That was
Right.
all that happened. We've now converted about close to 80% of the city's lighting inventory to LED. That specific fixture, which is the light, allows for the smart node to be placed on top of the fixture, where we can monitor to make sure the lights are working, but it also gives us the ability to dim in certain
So
circumstances.
RJ, as the lights are converted across the city, including Councilmember Duff's district,
Yeah.
you would be able to do dimming.
We would be able to, but
So
we
the answer
would,
is, once we've made the change out,
Correct.
exchange, then that technology would exist.
Yes. But we would fall back to the streetlight master plan because we identified zones within the city that where the dimming criteria would apply. Maybe it's best if I sit down
Yeah, maybe we should do it, yeah.
and show you the plans.
So I have some areas that converted.
There's some areas, well, even if we CAD converted, the streetlight policy kind of established.
We had the old lights, and they converted to LED, which ended up being brighter.
But even if they could all be converted, right? Even if they
Right.
were all converted, there's
Okay.
still a plan that says, here's the kind of lighting we're gonna provide in these neighborhoods. So that's what you're talking about.
Correct, because, Mesa with its size and, not all Mesa's the same. So we looked at geographically zones, so for example, along the 60 corridor, that's an area where, I'm going from memory, but where we would want more light. Other areas of the city, we don't, based on traffic volumes and that, we don't need
RJ,
as
why don't you
much.
share the master plan as it relates to District 4 with the council member? I think
Happy to
that
do
would-
that.
Good, so I can look at some of the
Yeah,
old
happy to do it.
neighborhoods that are upset about the bright lights. Okay, thanks.
I have just one question, RJ. So do you find, because this is obviously a topic that gets talked about a lot in my district, as you know, do you find that the dimming helps or that you have to put up the shields most of the time when constituents have issues with the amount of light?
We found the biggest benefit is putting up shields.
Okay.
Actually, because it's glare or spillover or perceived spillover that people are concerned about. So in your district specifically, we actually created a front shield because I think it was on Ellsworth, some of the lights were in the median, so, a back shield wouldn't do anything.
No.
We'd just be keeping light from hitting the roadway. So we actually developed a front shield that lit the road but kept the light from spilling over into folks' yards. So, but it's an interesting conversation because in some neighborhoods, when we put the first LED light up, the other side of this is people want to know when there's more LED lights coming in. Because the color temperature is different, that's why it's perceived as being brighter. Because
Very
it's,
white.
it's very white compared to the sort of more yellowy orange, glow from the high-pressure sodium lights, and some people want more. So,
Along those lines of monitoring, not every, if I'm understanding what you said correct, not necessarily every light that's converted is monitored? Because
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I had an instant about a month ago where the street lights were out for, I think, a couple weeks, and until a constituent finally told me. And they, obviously, they got turned on or fixed quickly, but, so I guess it wasn't monitored, or?
Once the system is fully converted, we will be able to monitor the entire system. Now, if there's a specific area where a light is out, this is where it can get more complicated because it may not be a city issue. So in your area, SRP
Yeah.
provides electric service. And sometimes that can take time, that there's a fault somewhere in an SRP line. And because we may have one controller light a series of lights, I know I'm getting into the weeds
Oh.
with this.
So you would know a section was out?
One light goes, a section goes out. In other places, the individual lights have the capacity,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
the answer is it kind of depends.
Yeah.
And I know people get frustrated because our goal is like 4 days to repair a street light. Again, I'm going from memory on our performance measure. And that's a very important priority for us to fix street lights. But in some cases, it's something that's outside of our control, and then we have to work with SRP as one example, to have their repair done to get the lights restored.
Well, in this case, just kudos to you. My impression, it was fixed.
Our streetlight
Quickly.
crew, I will say, is this is something they watch very closely,
Yeah.
and they take their job seriously.
Thank you, RJ. Council, other questions regarding Monday's agenda?
Hey,
Yep.
RJ, you dealt with the same issue in my district on Signal Butte, and they're going to put in some shields, but they're on back order. Do we know what the timeline is on
I'll
that?
find out.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
I
Yes,
did have one question on 5A, the modifying the fees and charges for the parks and rec. Is that something that's been sort of ongoing and?
Every year.
Every year it gets evaluated and updated? Okay. I remember it last year.
Is that right? Andrea? Sorry, I was just trying to.
And we sort of look at the market and
Yeah.
decide,
Compare with
as
other
well as our
cities.
cost and, okay.
I think it'd be good for Andrea to talk about that.
Sure.
Andrea, anything, I mean, obviously, we're trying to keep up with inflation, but a lot of the users of your services are families that have tight budgets as well. So how do we wrestle with that?
Mayor, Council, the fees and charges do get updated every year. It is a result of going through market comparisons to other cities. And then the range that we approve sometimes allows a different fee based on the season or the length of the program, which is why we have the ranges in place. But in terms of fee assistance, there's multiple programs that are very popular. The Mesa Recreation Scholarship, MRS, we started with the ARPA funding. It's still in effect through this year. And that allows a 50% discount based on whether a participant lives in a low mod income area or if they're receiving any other type of public assistance, such as free and reduced lunches at the schools or any other type of government assistance program, they become qualified for that 50% off. On top of that, if that still creates a burden, we have additional scholarship funds and work with families directly. So for example, if they have multiple kids in an after-school program, we may work with them to create an affordable rate so that all of their kids can participate.
So Mayor and Council, if you go through these commercial rates, and help me out, Andrea, a lot of these are related to the Dobson Ranch Golf Course. Obviously, we've had to set up new fees for the post, and the rental of the post is in there. There's some lane rentals at the swimming pools.
Correct.
But
These are the changes, the updates to our fee structure.
Yeah.
So that's all that's on that attachment for the council report for
And
approval.
special events, so it's not like every fee
Correct.
is going up. These are very specific, some of which are related to special events, the post, the golf course, the flow rider.
Flow rider rental.
That's important. So I'm just trying to give a highlight kind of
Yeah,
categories.
and another group change was adding the special event licensing fees into our fee schedule and off of business services fee schedule. So that is a grouping in there as well.
You feel good about the utilization of the scholarships? Is there enough awareness for folks who might be eligible?
We continue to push the message out. It increased. We've always had fee assistance available, and it used to be in a couple of hundred families that participated. When ARPA funding created the Mesa Recreation Scholarship, that skyrocketed to somewhere around 2,500 families that are participating now. And we do think there's potential there for more. So we continue to push it out. It's on all of our marketing materials now. But certainly if you hear of anybody that is concerned about that, to please have them reach out to us. It's a very easy process to qualify for. And once you meet that criteria, it stays attached to your registration account.
But that's short-lived, right? I mean, ARPA dollars are going to run out at some point,
ARPA dollars
right?
will end
then-
this year for the scholarships.
So then that will decrease pretty significantly the amount available for the scholarships?
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, I don't expect us to remove it because we've always had fee assistance in place. We're not trying to make it harder for people to participate after this is over. It has helped us just raise awareness that there is fee assistance available. So I'd expect us to
General fund would have
continue
to
it.
Okay, so we're going to supplement, I mean, we're not going to,
Essentially supplement what we used to do.
okay,
with general fund.
with ARPA, with general funds, okay.
Let's talk just a second about the post. Mr. Brady, I think you have made efforts to reduce the fees, the proposed fees for the post, because we want this to be utilized, and we want the community to feel like they own this. We don't want to price it at market rates for venues. We want it to be more affordable. And can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Mayor, we have an introductory rate that's in place for this first year of operations with the intent of getting people to come visit, become familiar with the venue, and utilize it. But it is focused on city-promoted, city-sponsored types of events. And so once the introductory rates are ended after this year, the idea is that the most cost-effective rate during business hours during the week will still be very low, and things that require us to bring in staff in off hours or have other lighting requirements, AV requirements, catering requirements would have those extra fees on there. What's included in this fee schedule was use of the kitchen. We didn't have that because we adopted the original fees for the post a year ago. And then we also didn't have a fee for that small conference room on the mezzanine level, and so that was added.
That's great. We're learning what the demand is for this, but I would just want to make sure that
Yeah,
it's
we're
not,
watching it.
it's not dark as
It's
much
getting
as
used.
possible.
It
Yeah.
is getting used, I would say that
Yeah.
for sure.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Council, any other questions regarding Monday night's agenda? All right. Moving on then, item 2A, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned, I said Vice Mayor Heredia was not participating.
Oh, there he is.
I stand corrected. He is, he's on Zoom. He's in Washington DC on city business, so we appreciate it, what he's at, and he is going to be leaving at some point, but Mr. Heredia, thank you for being part of our meeting. Any questions you'd like to ask at this time?
No questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on then. Item 2A is a presentation and discussion of the fiscal year 2024-25 summary of the proposed budget. Brian and Christy, welcome.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Mayor, you asked if we could do a budget presentation yesterday. Well, here you go.
There you go, thank you.
So, thought you would. So, as mentioned, my name is Brian Ritchell. I am the Director for the Office of Management and Budget, and with me is Christy Griffin. She is the Budget Coordinator over Operations in the Office of Management and Budget. So today, we'll be presenting the City Manager proposed budget overview for fiscal year 24-25. Attached in Legistar is also a detailed council report that summarizes all of the funds and revenues and departments and in a little more detail than what we'll be going over. But then also just to remind council that this is just an overview. All throughout April, specific departments will be coming up and doing a budget for their specific department for you guys. So just a brief reminder on an annual budget. The MESA is required to appropriate all of the annual expenditures for the next fiscal year and set a secondary property tax levy to associated rate for. And just a reminder that the secondary property tax is for debt service only. We do not use that for our normal operations and maintenance of the general fund. An annual budget sets the maximum expenditure limit for the city for the fiscal year, and that is part of home rule that we've elected and the voters have approved. The third bullet point is based, our budget is always based on total resources available, which is revenues coming in and also fund balance to sufficient to cover the budgeted expenses. So the theme for this year is financial and environmental sustainability. And so when we go through, you'll kind of see that theme of trying to stay financially sustainable, but also environmentally sustainable with the Mesa Climate Action Plan. The 24-25 proposed city manager proposed budget, it focuses on a few things. One of them is the to balance current levels of service, but then also to look at the future needs of the city. While addressing these next bullet points, I'll just read a few of them. One big one is the reduced ongoing revenues, as we are aware that the state income flat tax is now being implemented, so that will reduce our state shared revenues for income tax, but then also a big one is the elimination of the residential rental tax. And that is for this fiscal year coming up, it's only a half a year, so it's about $11 million, but ongoing for the fiscal year, it's about a little over $22 million for the city as a whole. So, also, labor costs are increasing, as we know, due to staff overtime, but also attracting qualified workforce. Continue higher than normal inflation on commodities, services, and charges, as we'll see later on, especially when it comes to the utility fund. One of the major things that is happening is we have older contracts that are now expiring, and now we have to get new contracts that are at the higher price. So some of those older contracts were in place or put in place before COVID, before the high inflation. Now those are expiring, and now some of these contracts are significantly higher. Utility costs continue to increase. Continuation of the climate action plan. And then some of the big ones for our capital improvement is cost overruns and delays in receiving construction materials, but then also delay and cost increases related to fleet, fuel supplies and parts. So those are some of the areas, impacts of the budget for this year. Just a reminder of the general governmental funds financial principles. We've got the 5 principles here. I'll just briefly go over a few. Just the net sources and uses is one of the big ones that we look at, but also our fund balance reserve over the 5 years of 10 to 15%, and then sustainability of programs and services, also keeping wages at a competitive rate for qualified employees and staff, but then also investing in our infrastructure. So what we do is our financial forecast, the current expenditures and revenues, we look at the historical trends and then any future trends that we may try to look at for revenues over the multiple years. Then it also, what it does is helps us evaluate those needs and services and what we can provide for and sustain for those future years. And then also we incorporate enhanced ability to plan out, and then financial policies call for uses ongoing revenues with ongoing expenses. So we don't like to, and we haven't past practice of using one-time revenues for ongoing expenses, because once that revenue is over, we still have that expense. We try to balance it out with the ongoing. On the expenditure side forecast, we analyze historical, but then also forecast out using a bunch of different CPIs and trends. With personal services, a major factor in the budget is pension rates, but also medical premiums, salary movement, and also overtime, as you'll see in the next couple of slides. Other services and commodities, kind of some large contracts that I mentioned, those are separately handled in the forecast and forecasted out with using CPI. And then as mentioned, capital, major capital expenditures. We try to forecast, we work with all the departments and try to forecast some of those major projects that are going to be going on. Other significant pressures, as mentioned, was overtime, but specifically public safety overtime. Capital projects, costs continue to come in significantly higher, as we've seen, especially with the Gateway Library presentation, but also with some of the other ones that are coming. We're seeing those contracts and those expenses higher. And then also with facility maintenance and improvements. The city has dedicated, set aside funds for improving just our, the infrastructure around some of the buildings, and some of those costs are increasing also. So one of the pressures here, one of the graphs is the police sworn overtime, and we just started looking at this year a little more closely. And it's one of the things that we're going to be focusing on for this next fiscal year is kind of the trajectory. I just want you to see the trajectory of the overtime for police sworn. So in previous years, going back all the way about to 2014 and then coming up to 2018 around there, 2019, it was kind of steady. But recently we've started seeing that overtime escalate significantly. So we're looking at that trajectory, and part of this fiscal year will be kind of addressing that. And PD will be able to expand on this a little bit during their budget presentation.
I'm sorry, quick question. Is the reason for the increase in overtime because we're understaffed? And so it just goes to the fact that
We're understaffed because people aren't showing up to work, both in police and fire. A lot of sick leave and absences. So we have positions, and obviously we need to keep running more academies and filling positions, but absenteeism becomes a big challenge for us. And we're having an internal discussion about when is something going to be just paid out on straight overtime versus when someone can take for comp time, where they get to choose then when they get to come in or not come in. And so that's becoming a problem for us. So it's a variety of things. We're trying to, it's not a simple one answer to the solution, but obviously since the implementation, in my mind, since the legislative changes on sick leave, that's created a significant impact on our budget, on overtime. We've tried to create incentives about attendance that has not had the significant impact we were hoping for. So we're working with both police and fire to work on ways to do a better job of managing schedules and making sure, and how, encouraging or finding ways to make sure people are showing up for their shifts and their, so we're not having to cover an overtime. Now, there are times when we have to hold individuals over for purposes of a incident that happens, at the end of, near the end of their shift. That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking, mostly we're talking about individuals just not showing up. And then when I say that, that means that they take sick leave, they take, their reasons that they're not, they have for, it's not like they're absent without cause, but the amount of leave that's being taken is significantly impacting our overtime.
I was going to ask, you kind of, I think you might have answered it, but if this seems to be a culture shift or more a result, you said, of
When was that
changes in the
change?
law?
That change in the sick leave was about when?
2 years ago. 2 to 3 years ago.
Looks pretty close to this trend, so.
What's the change?
So the change, and we'll bring this, we'll get in more detail, but essentially, there doesn't, an employee can take sick leave really without any oversight or notice to the employer. Right. Or reason, you don't need a doctor's note or anything like that anymore, so. And as you can imagine, for the police and fire administration, this creates a tremendous amount of challenges for them because we have both on fire and police side, we have minimum staffing, right? Especially, fire, we have to have, so many people on a truck. And so we're oftentimes scrambling to pull people and get them, and we are having to hold someone overtime, hold someone over for overtime. And the same thing, is a challenge of getting police officers to show up on the, the days that not everybody wants to be at work on the weekends or late at night. So it's just things that we're having to manage. The message has been delivered. It's a significant impact in this budget. We've had to add $12 million
Yes.
To cover that this year. We've challenged both groups, especially police, and I know they're on it. They're communicating down. And we're going to change some policies and work with them on trying to get it. But we've asked them both to address that issue when they come to you in their budget presentations. But it's become so significant that it is now becoming a factor in like the total forecast. And so that's why we wanted to bring it to your attention, because we have work to do to try to figure out how to manage this.
Yeah, and I assume this trajectory is based on if we don't
If we don't
these
make it,
changes.
yeah, exactly.
Right, so the goal is to get this to
The goal is to
level
try to
out
figure
based
this
on
out.
some
Yep,
policy
absolutely,
changes. Okay.
absolutely.
Chris, I might just add that to your conversation. On the fire side, we're at our par levels. I mean, we're staffed completely up to everything on our personnel, right? But we're understaffed on our police side, but we're going to come up to our par level sometime soon. In this next academy, I think we're getting like 54
But we're always
recruits.
adding additional, we've added additional sworn positions, and we're running 3 academies to keep up with both the attrition as well as trying to add those
Right.
additional positions.
Well, I guess my point was on the fire side, we're staffed appropriately.
Yeah.
And on the police side, we still have some room to gain on our patrol side. But but to my point, by hiring the 3 academies per year, we're going to get up to our par level.
Yeah, but it's always there's like a moment in time, right? Because it's a revolving door, right?
Sure.
You're right, we're doing everything we can to cover the attrition as well as to add the additional staff. We need to either open up new fire stations or to grow the number of patrol officers that we've budgeted for, that we have identified. But it's always kind of like, and we do a pretty good job of anticipating the retirements and, other reasons for people to leave. And so, but it's like every time we say we've got an academy, it's because we're just trying to get those individuals, out on the street, just as we're losing, individuals through retirement and other things, so.
Well, it takes about a year to get a person from the academy
Right, so we're.
on the
so-
street.
Yeah, so like today, we already have the staff for the new station that's being built at Northeast. So for a period of time, theoretically, we've doubled up, and so, yeah.
I guess, Brian, what are the dots on here along with the trajectory line, the blue dots? I'm not
So-
following that.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Freeman, those blue dots are actually it's by week. So those blue dots are the amount of hours taken that specific.
The line is just trying to
So
find
the-
the median. and
Yep, and so the line
best
going
fit.
out is if we stayed on that trajectory of that average going up, that solid line is where we would be in the future years.
Okay, thank you.
And then to Mayor, Councilmember Freeman, to your question is, yes, with police, with the 3 academies, and Christy will go into this a little bit later, is we do look with those 3 academies, look at the attrition and also the vacancy rate. And this year, we're hoping that if we have fully staffed academies, and the chief can correct me if I'm wrong, is that we should be plus 43. And so we should be able to cut down on a lot of those vacancies that we have now, but then also for those planned attritions that we have. So.
Thank you. That was my question.
And then on the fire side, they're also, so this is a little bit different graph, but they're starting to have that trajectory as police. They're a little different. Police and fire are a little different in their overtimes. Some of this overtime is for minimum staffing, but then it's also the overtime for the transport program. So we do have some firefighters that do go over and do the transport, so that does count as overtime. So it's a little different, but we're still monitoring that for the health and wellness of our firefighters of doing a lot of overtime and all that. So we are still looking at it, and so both police and fire in their presentations coming up in a couple of weeks will be addressing this overtime.
That's a question I had. So the blue is the minimum staffing level that's increasing with overtime, and then the fire event is on top of?
It is,
Can you-
yes.
sorry.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, it is. So minimum, so it's kind of in the colors. So the blue is for minimum staffing, any overtime for minimum staffing areas. A decent amount of it, as I mentioned, is the transport program.
Okay.
And then, yes, the fire events, any type of fire event that they stay after or anything like that, that's the orange, and then any other is that gray. So as you see, the blue is increasing, but so is some of the orange. Orange is staying a little more consistent than the blue, but we're still kind of looking at that to see what
The
we
blue
can
is
do.
what we need to solve for.
Yeah, and, okay. I was having a hard time following the fire event.
Blue is just
Where-
minimum staffing, so we got to
Okay.
figure out how to
Yeah.
avoid using overtime to achieve the minimum staffing.
Just a question. Could we have a different graph next time?
Yes.
It's kind of like all bunched together there. Just make it easier for me to.
We're too old to see that.
Thank you.
So now Christy will go into the highlighted areas and themes for the fiscal year 24-25 budget that we would like to overview right now.
Yeah, so the proposed budget for fiscal year 24-25 highlights 5 main themes: financial sustainability, public safety staffing, infill and redevelopment, workforce development, and the Mesa Climate Action Plan. So as Brian had mentioned, the city ensures financial sustainability by aligning the forecasted ongoing expenditures to ensure that we have the revenues ongoing to support that. As he also mentioned, those ongoing revenues have declined due to the implementation of the state income flat tax and the elimination of the residential rental tax. So as a result, the departments were asked to identify areas in their base budget where they could reduce due to improved operational efficiencies. The proposed budget, as we had just discussed, includes 3 police academies, which will contain 110 recruits, and then 2 fire academies for 50 fire recruits. So the academy for the fire, that includes 12 new firefighter positions for Station 224 and 8 new firefighter positions for a new 12-hour medical response unit. The police academy includes, we have 5 additional sworn police officers being added this year. But as we had mentioned, due to vacancies and then projected attrition over the next year, the department has projected that they'll end the year with 43 increased police officers. And then the budget also includes a civilianization of a special operations detective. So that will be converted into 2 full-time civilian program assistant positions for the ballistics analysis program, NIBIN.
So Mayor and Council, we're always looking for opportunities to civilianize, so we can take a sworn officer and keep them more on the only things that they can do, and if we can find positions where a skilled civilian can come in and take over, that's what we try to find those.
Civilize them, but civilianize them. So
Yes.
civilization.
Well, it takes both sometimes.
And then to support the implementation of MESA's redevelopment areas, the proposed budget includes adding 2 new positions to support initiatives and projects, to identify target areas, to redevelop, and providing incentives and policy adjustments to attract infill development citywide.
I have a quick question on that. So this 2 additional, is that going to be under planning or economic development, or, I mean, where is that hosted, or do we know right now?
We do. We're proposing to put those positions currently in, I don't think we have the name for it yet, is it here? No, we're still working on it. That's why I'm waiting for Mr. McVeigh to reveal. So it'll be under where Jeff works, but we still have to have downtown transformation, but then we would have a citywide redevelopment section with these positions. We're working, I've challenged Jeff to come back with what are we going to call all of that, because I don't want to lose the emphasis on downtown transformation.
Right.
But a lot of the area that we've identified for obviously infill and redevelopment includes downtown and near downtown, so it has a fit, but we also want to have staff that can do throughout the city. So we're trying to figure out how to, I guess, what's the name of this department going to be, so we're working on that.
Okay, thank you.
But we'll, hopefully by the time we're going to come back with a presentation specifically on this, and it will include, to your point, Councilmember Duff, the presentation will include, we're going to create a working group. It's not a department, but the working group will include, and we did this with the general plan, I think with some success, it'll have, economic development services, it'll have code compliance. And so we'll have a group of departments, including obviously downtown, who are going to be working on an ongoing basis, working on infill. Because infill is not one department. It's going to take a village of city departments to make it work. And that's what we're still kind of working to formalize that structure.
And we're also working on some infill incentives and such through.
Yeah, as we go through and do the inventory and opportunities, it's actually in the RDA studies talks about the opportunity for looking at different policies. And by having the council already adopted these redevelopment areas under state statute, it gives you that flexibility that you can create policies and incentives just within those RDAs.
Okay, thank you.
I know it wasn't an exhaustive list of departments, but I didn't hear transportation.
Oh, yes. And because there could be all kinds, it could include utilities sometimes too. So it's what we need, but there'll probably be a core group, and then obviously as we need, whether it's transportation or utilities, whatever it might be. It may be working with public safety too, so.
I just wanted to express that I'm really glad we're doing this. I'm in my 4th year on council now, and I've been a little bit frustrated that I just, as a council member, can't do much in the infill spot when so much is needing to be done. My district's full of infill opportunities, and so this is exciting to me that we're gonna have actual staff members focused on this. Outside downtown transformation area, the OD, no, I don't know. But yeah, so Jeff's gonna have to, or I guess he's just gonna oversee the people looking outside of downtown Mesa, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Jeff will have his lenses broadened a little bit.
Yeah, because I do think I can have hopes and dreams for old shopping centers in my area, but I can only do so much as a council member. So knowing that we're really going to interdepartmentally work on a lot of different ways to make this happen is exciting to me. So thank you for that.
Well, I'll note, I think, Mr. Brady, you added these positions following our strategic planning.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
meeting,
these
so
are,
this
hopefully
is in
you're seeing
response.
a response to
Yeah.
that, yes. Yeah.
I don't know if this is time to bring this up or not, but I thought I would. So if you go back to the slide that you have all the themes, I did notice that every section from our strategic planning session is in here except for placemaking. Is there a reason for that?
Well, and I think not that we're not going to do it, we're trying to figure out how it fits in the operational budget. And so I think we want to come back to council and have more conversation. But I was trying to figure out where and how in the budget impact what that look like. I think it's a conversation of what placemaking means. It's, in some ways, it may fit more on the capital side, right, initially, to create those spaces. So,
Yeah, but it seems like climate action is sometimes more on the grant side or federal dollars, but we still do some work internally to set plans and to analyze and data and
well, we commit over
forecast.
$5 million a year to climate action plan implementation.
In the operation budget.
Yes, yeah.
But I mean, it seems that we can do things internally for placemaking, just like we can for redevelopment. And even though the funding may come primarily from bonds and capital funding, but there's still work to be done internally within departments for it, I would think.
I think there is. I think what I was struggling with is in the proposed budget, I mean, not to say it's a priority and we're talking about it, but in the context of approving an operational budget, I wasn't sure. I was struggling with how that fit based on the conversations we had, because it felt like it was trying to create connectivity between places and having those conversations. I think we need to have kind of a broad, conversation with the council. What does that mean across the city? I don't know, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it a little bit.
I agree. I mean, it's not straightforward, but I think if it's not identified, I'm not sure how it gets done.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask is there currently any staff members at the City of Mesa that are focused on placemaking or have that as something they look at? Like, is that, I mean, I know everyone is in their own way, right? But now we're going to have two people specifically looking at infill redevelopment. Like, are there people who look at placemaking?
I think what I need is another conversation with the council about, because when I talk to council members, it does seem like it can be different, right? And I think I'm struggling with, what is it we would need? What is the city's role? What does that mean for us? Is it creating the spaces for people to come and gather? Is it creating the connectivity to get to that spaces? But is it connecting to public spaces? Is it connecting to private spaces?
Yeah.
But when you talk about connectivity, that's then becomes, how are we doing that? Is it through a capital project typically? So those, I mean, I think that's where we need to have. And I owe the council, we need to come back and just kind of lay out some options. I think we need to get clarity around the definition. It's not, just because it's not in here doesn't mean it's not a priority.
But like, what department or what employees think about placemaking on a consistent basis?
When you're talking, if we're trying to create placemaking where people work and where we have major economic development, we're doing it now, right? So we're working with Councilman Heredia on placemaking as it relates to the Fiesta Mall, right? And we're trying to figure out, well, what does that look like? How does that become a place where people want to congregate and come to?
So the placemaking's happening in these conversations with different projects.
I mean, I would suggest that we've done amazing placemakings, right? Riverview Park, Cub Stadium, Holcomb Stadium, right? We've done a lot of these, major either parks or gathering spaces. Libraries. So, but is that what you're imagining that is? So I don't know. We need to have that conversation as a group. And maybe when we get to the capital budget part of this presentation, which is kind of at the latter end, maybe we could put in a placemaking kind of conversation.
Yeah, because I think it also includes, as we stated, pedestrian activity and multimodal transportation. That's a big piece of it.
Yep.
A lot of work can be done on that. What is it that we have? What is it that we want?
Right.
Where should it go? So
that usually would fall under a capital, so it'd be typically an engineering kind of discussion and how we design that public space, that right of way. That's usually where that takes place.
Right. And I think that's great. I'm just saying it should be included. It was part of the strategic
Sure.
priorities. It
Okay.
should be included so that we know it's being worked on.
So we would do that. We'll have that conversation when we get to the capital presentations then.
I'll just add on to that. I know it's a long conversation, and we talked about placemaking in our general plan, which is very significant. But as far as budgeting, in our general plan, we're identifying activity centers, urban centers across our city, like mini downtowns, in which we can have mixed-use development of living, working, play, and building more vertical there, and having that as a place for that surrounding area to go to the restaurants, to live, to. So we've identified our urban centers in our general plan, and as we look forward to the budget, we can see what opportunities, like Fiesta Mall right now is under a redevelopment with a proposed development coming in. What is that opportunity to create that place? Because it is identified in the general plan as an urban center, a place to build in a mixed-use environment, and what is the connectivity to get to that place from other parts of the city. But I think it's at least a starting place to create place is where these urban centers that we're trying to develop a place for the surrounding community and regionally to congregate. In a simplistic overview, you could say downtown is in a mixed-use environment where it has a little bit like that. So urban centers are a scaled-down version of a downtown, but providing those same kind of opportunities in a smaller scale in around our city. So placemaking for me is that would be a place to start anchoring where opportunities are and where the budget investments are looking when we have those opportunities to develop those areas. Thank you.
Just to bounce off that, I think this is, we're going to pick a department. I think Nana's department in development services, they deal with planning, we deal with zoning, we deal with all that, and that this would be a good conversation to have when Nana brings his presentation for budget.
Yeah, so that would be glad to do that. I think the conversation, though, is interesting because it's not something we control completely, right? It's a partnership with the development community. And so we've got, if we're going to identify opportunities for placemaking, it really has to be an active opportunity where we have a relationship with, assuming a developer or identify an area to begin approaching a developer to work with. And, those are partnerships that we've got to figure out how those relationships, and while the relationships are certainly with development services, they include, economic development, they include sometimes it's transportation, sometimes it's the utilities. We spend a lot of time with multiple disciplines in conversation with those large places.
That's why I think in our general plan, having a commitment to that so that when we look at development, we say, what are those policies for that particular area? What do we want to see? What is the visioning? And then the negotiation starts between our public space and the private space. And that's why I think having the guiding principles very strong in our general plan will help us identify and hold that criteria.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, for workforce development, the proposed budget includes resources needed to support the efforts between economic development and the education workforce development staff. So the goal is to really cultivate a skilled and competent workforce that meets the current and future needs of high-wage job markets. So those would be implementing strategies to equip individuals with the skills, training, education requirements in the industries and occupations that offer those high-wage jobs, and then focusing on initiatives that foster collaboration between public and private organizations, such as internships and apprenticeships, to really create those pathways to employment. And then for the Mesa Climate Action Plan, the proposed budget includes adding the following types of projects, such as solar and electric vehicle charging, watershed protection, neighborhood tree planting programs, the removal of non-functional grass at city facilities and transitioning that to xeriscape, and then LED lighting conversions at city sports fields.
So with that, the proposed budget on this slide, what we look to is, and I want to thank all the departments because this budget process wasn't an easy one to go through, trying to look for efficiencies, but also trying to meet their needs. What we do look for, it does meet the goals and principles of at the very end of the 28-29 fiscal year at 12%. We are above our policy of 8 to 10%. But one thing that we are looking at and keeping close, as I know the city manager has mentioned at the strategic priorities meeting for council, is that next year looks good for 24-25 on the fund balance at about 31.3%. However, it's that negative net sources and uses right there in the middle ongoing that are significant, that if we don't take a look at now and try to plan for the future, that it may be a tough budget in the next couple of years if we don't do anything. So this budget wasn't easy, as I mentioned, but it's a good budget for the fiscal year, but we're still trying to plan for that outer years and try to keep within our principles and our financial policies.
So Mayor and Council, just if you recall, in February, when we presented the same forecast to you, we talked about the challenges that were before us. We are facing in that same fiscal year 28-29, our fund balance was only at 8.5%, which was about a $62 million actual reserve. And we talked about how that was not, we weren't comfortable with that position out into the future, so we knew that we needed to start making changes today. Now, the good news is we've been able to accomplish that. We're proposing that by the adjustments we've made for this coming year and then the forecast, we'll be at 12% and an $87 million ending reserve in that final year. But I think it is important, while I'd hate to be the Eeyore about budgeting, because right now today, we are projecting that the budget that the current fiscal year that we're in today, when we're halfway through, more than halfway through. Yeah, we're much more than halfway through. We're projecting that we're going to end the year at the highest ending reserves in the history of Mesa. Almost $230 million will be in our ending reserve balance, but as we're projecting this year. And as you can see, that's almost 34, almost 35% reserve. Remember, our goal is to try to keep it somewhere between 8 and 10%. So we have achieved that times 3, and we have the historic highs as far as reserves. I know council is sometimes faced with questions about the city's finances. I mean, I would just say today, I don't know, there's a lot of ways you can measure financial stability, but when you look at your savings account and reserves and say it's the highest it's ever been in the history of the city, I think that's pretty significant. In the last 2 years alone, we will have contributed, our net uses and sources will be on the plus side of almost $45 million that we've added to the reserves, not drawn down on the reserves. So we're working within the constraints of the revenues, and we're contributing more or adding more to the reserves in the last couple of years. So what's happening? What's happening after this year is that we're facing some significant headwinds, which we've just, they've explained in the presentation, but these legislative policy decisions that are reducing revenues from cities is having a huge impact on us, whether it's the flat tax, income tax, but this residential rental tax, you think about it, it's $20+ million a year. So throughout this forecast, if it's 5 years, that's $100 million of lost revenues that we had to try to figure out how to work around. And what it means is, while you're going to see a budget with some increases, because some things we just have to do, it has really limited our ability to address, again, more competitive compensation for all employees. There's a lot of projects that we just have to put on hold in operations. Our challenge really has been we're getting hit at the same time revenues are being decreased. We're hit with inflationary impacts. Our fleet costs are going up significantly. Our construction costs are going up significantly. So we appreciate departments who have really tried to find ways to tighten the budget, But at the same time, many times when they found something they could cut, we were able to, not necessarily, what we were able to do is help them use that to fund something that they really needed. We kind of use as an offset. So while we asked for a 2% reduction, what we ended up doing most of the time, a lot of the times, was taking some of their reductions and then using that to help fund something they really needed going forward. So this is the budget going forward. It's not, it's great for the next 2 years if you're just looking at reserves, but that drawdown in net sources and uses is a concern. You know, our crystal ball gets a little fuzzier outside of 5 years. We do think it starts to look a little better, but I'm not going to tell you that this is, you know, this thing will change, but at least for the planning purposes, we feel like we've just got inside the parameters that we need to financially.
So obviously there's impacts to sources that we have no control over. And so we focus on our revenues and our expenditures and our uses. So as a city, do you look at future opportunities for more sources? Like, is that a thing, or do you really just have to focus on the uses?
We don't anticipate any new legislative increases necessarily. You use different modeling to anticipate economic, trends and how that might affect our mostly sales tax is how we look at it. I don't know, Brian, anything? I mean, we take the estimates from the state on income tax, and it really is just, we don't build into here, we would tell you, right? We don't build in here the assumption that there's some new revenue that's going to show up.
A city works
Yeah,
to
Mayor,
look for that.
Councilmember Spilsbury, the major revenue source for the city is sales tax. So the state shared revenues of the state shared sales tax, the income tax, and the vehicle license fees, those are significant, but not as significant as the local sales tax. So to be able to do that would probably be going to the voters for an increase in the sales tax. So that would be one of the things, but then yes, also legislation of hopefully not reducing our revenues would be another one.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I have one comment on that, and I need to see the budget in more detail, but I know we've had a huge amount of development, and construction sales tax is significant for us, and as I look out into the forecast and that we are getting to the point that we're being built out as far as land use, we still have some opportunities, but construction and development usually cycles. There's a lot of construction, and then economies change or financing changes, and then we'll take a dip. And so as we look in the future, I'm concerned too that as development may soften for various reasons, that will impact just through the normal cycle thing, which is compounded by these things that are happening at the state. So to have a conservative outlook.
Yeah, Mayor, Council Member Duff, we do forecast that. We do look at the trends, and we do have built in here, and we have for the past few years, kind of a slowdown of construction sales tax. And that's where I mentioned that the city has done a great job of looking at ongoing revenues and ongoing expenses to fund the ongoing expenses. What we look at as those construction sales tax is a one-time expense or one-time revenue. And so what we do is we look to fund that with one-time expenses. For instance, if we're remodeling a building or doing the climate action plan, things like that we use that. But we do forecast out a slowdown and kind of look at those trends in the forecast.
We use the construction sales tax a lot. We have especially the significant increase in that to set aside to cover these overruns on all these capital projects. So we've probably allocated nearly $20+ million, maybe more than that, to cover gaps in capital projects. So that's how we've been using it.
And we've been able to use it also for the new city hall.
Yeah,
So-
that's right.
Thank you.
So, Moving on to the utilities. Utilities have similar principles, the 5 principles. Big one is the net sources and uses, but then also a 20% or higher reserve fund balance. We like to keep that a little bit higher than the general governmental fund due to the rating agencies for the capital bonds. Then also equity between residential and non-residential rates, but then also looking to keep the utilities affordable. So in forecasting the sources, we take an approach where the utility revenues include statistical analysis, but then collaboration with the departments. We do use a software to kind of forecast out what the accounts and what the revenues and economic trends would be. And then any other relevant economic indicators, such as growth or historical trends. What we also do is work closely with the departments on any major manufacturers or businesses going in to see what that usage would be. And then also any other account growths and consumption uses. So on the uses forecasting, which is the expenditures, we forecast large budget items, but they can fluctuate over time. For instance, some of the capital projects that we budget in year 1, by the time we go to construction, that inflation has kicked in a little bit. And so we take a look at those. But also then the debt service payments that include for the utility fund forecast where the funds are transferred accordingly. So some of the challenges that we're facing with the utility fund is cost significantly increased for commodities such as water, chemicals, and landfill, but then also the construction costs that we're seeing. As for instance, the AMI a couple of weeks ago, the council approved an increase for the AMI project. And then also what I think we presented to you in the council strategic priorities meeting was we've seen inflation over the past 3 years go as high as 20%. So it's gone 20% from 3 years ago. So we're seeing those impact us. And for meeting community needs and growth, we're looking at supporting several significant water and wastewater projects to increase additional water resources and maintain current service levels. A couple of those is doing a feasibility study for the Bartlett Dam modification, which would help add water to our portfolio. But then also the Salt River CAP interconnect facility, the SCIF, so that those projects are in there doing a feasibility study. But then also to support the growth of the solid waste and fleet replacement, and also to support significant gas and electric growth projects and maintain current service levels that we're seeing downtown. So similar to the general governmental fund forecast, here is the utility fund forecast. The current forecast that we're looking at for next year is 18.8% reserve. But however, going out in the outer years, we do see the negative net sources and uses slowly become better, but in that outer year, we're looking at a 6.1%. And I think when we looked at it a couple of months ago, or when we presented previously in November with the rate increase, I think we were around 5.5. So we are looking a little bit better, but we're still working with the departments. We will come back in the fall for the rate adjustment process, and that'll give us a better gauge as we go through the next couple of months to see how those revenues and account growths are going.
Brian, so on the 24-25 budget, our reserve fund objective is 20%, and we're hitting below that. So that is a concern for this upcoming budget.
It is that is the principle is 20% or higher. Our financial policy is 8 to 10%. So our principle, we would like to have it. We are within the above the principle or the policy that council has set. But yes, it is a concern that we would like to have it as 20%, but we don't want to restrict the utilities to be able to make that 20%. So we're trying to work within what we can. And yes, it would be a concern going into the rates. However, we do have, this does incorporate the rate adjustments that were presented last fall. So we have not modified those at all. So that's the process we'll start going through. The departments, we'll start collaborating with the departments here in the end of June, beginning of July to start looking at their the accounts, their future expenditures. I know some of the contracts will then be signed, and we'll be able to come back in the fall with some rate adjustment recommendations. Hopefully, we'll see if they stay the same, the adjustments stay the same, or if we need to adjust them higher or lower. But yes, that is, our principal is 20.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to understand, between a policy of 8 to 10 and a principle of 20%. So what's our goal?
So our ultimate goal would be the 20%. That would be where we would like to go, especially for when we go out for credit rating agencies. That is the city's goal in principle, but we are within the policy that the set. So we do have a floor that we do not want to go below, which that's the policy.
Okay, I see.
And that's the 8 to 10%.
Okay.
But our goal would be to stay above 20%.
So this forecast presumes no utility rate increases?
So this forecast presumes the adjustments that were presented as the future years last fall. So we do, the city,
It
the
does
city of Mesa
anticipate, yeah.
does. So what we like to do is do adjustments throughout the forecast, minimal or adjustments throughout the forecast to kind of keep it consistent. Unlike some other cities where they don't do any rate adjustments for a couple of years, but then they have to do a very significant rate adjustment in 1 year. What we like to do is smooth it out. And so what we presented last fall, for instance, we had for this coming up fiscal year, a 3% increase in water residential. That is what's incorporated in here is kind
For
of.
the future
For the
years.
future.
Okay, so it's about.
It
we
has
do
the
have-
schedule that you've seen, right? When
Yeah.
we come to you, we show you the future forecast of this with the rates. What we're saying now is even those future rates wouldn't quite be enough. And so, but we didn't want to start messing with that until we get into the fall when we do the rate discussion. Because we think sometimes for us, making the difference is not waiting until the year before it needs to happen, is just, maybe come to council, like, listen, if we can do another 1% or 2% or something like that, it's going to make a big difference. And doing that consecutively over 2 or 3 years, that may solve the problem. Or other changes in operational costs too.
So,
I think that's a
Mayor,
good point.
Council, on the slide right here, this is what was presented, or this is the forecast, but down below in the green and gray, the green is what was adopted by council in December. The gray is that forecasted out. So we do anticipate some adjustments in our forecast, but that helps the smoothing out of those,
And
so we
then-
don't have spikes.
Does this take into account some of those contracts you talked about? Are they some commodities contracts
The
as
ones
well,
that we
or-
know about,
Okay.
yes. And what we do with some of those commodities, we do an inflationary factor, with those commodities.
What is the escalation index you use for the commodities? Is it?
It ranges,
CPI, or is
some
it
of them
something else?
some of them are Western CPI, and some of them are what the trends are, and then also what the industry is looking at. So it ranges. We take a bunch of different economic factors into play depending on what we're looking at.
Thank you.
So just to put a cap on utilities, we're not, over the budget process in the next couple of months, we're not going to consider rate increases, but that in the fall, we're going to be forced to confront that, as has every other city on the planet
Yeah,
right now.
just, and it's something, that's when we do the forecast. Because we've always wanted to line up rate increases with the beginning of the year as opposed to the fiscal year, because then you're making rate increases in like July and August, and with high water consumption, that always seemed like not a good idea, for the customer to be hit with, the highest consumption and rate increases, where if we do it in the fall, then we implement them at the beginning of the year, and there's, we can provide that, at least information about the impacts we'll have.
Well, and I think the important point, as you mentioned, is that we gradually increase anyway, and so it won't be as
Right.
dramatic as some other municipalities. I think that our constituents will be thankful for that, hopefully.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, correct. We take a look at that, and we've seen where we've projected out, say, a 3% increase. However, depending on the revenues, we dropped it to 2.5 when we came to that rate process. So it can go up or down depending on how we go. But then, yeah, in the fall, we'll be presenting, staff will be presenting what we feel would be rate increase in the fall.
All right, thank you, council. Does that, I'm sorry, please complete.
Yep, no, just one more slide.
Okay.
Yep. So
I
just the budget
saw.
process, since this is the mayor's last budget process, I'm sure he'll be happy to see June 19th come. So the next month, for April 1st through the 25th, departments, we have some selected departments that will come and present their detailed budget to the council. And then on May 2nd, we'll come back and we will do a tentative budget presentation and then also a CIP presentation for the non-utilities. That's usually like the streets, parks, things like that. And then on May 20th is when the tentative adopted budget will go to council for consideration. And then on June 3rd, we will, the council will consider adopting the 5-year capital plan, but then also do a public hearing for the secondary property tax, and then consider the final adoption of the budget. And then on June 19th is when council would consider adopting the secondary property tax. So that's kind of the calendar for the next couple of months. And with that, take any other questions.
Thank you. All right, well, that was a great, set the stage for the next month of meetings, so thank you very much, Brian. We are about an hour and a half into this meeting. I know we've got another substantial agenda item next, so let's take a break and report back at 9:15. All right, thank you. I think we're ready to continue. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda, item 2B, is a presentation and discussion on proposed city ballot measures. That's a bad way to start. I'm going to start over again. Can we rewind the tape and start over? Item 2B is a presentation and discussion on proposed city ballot measures for the 2024 general election, including possible city charter amendments and other ballot questions. Thank you, ladies. We're looking forward to discussing this important topic.
Mayor, council members, thank you for starting us off with some levity on a subject that I know for some folks can be dry, but we will hopefully keep it going. Good morning. My name is Kelly Whittemore. I'm a deputy city attorney in our city attorney's office.
And Holly Mosley, city clerk.
So what we want to speak to you this morning is about some proposed charter amendments that we'd like to bring forward for the council to take into consideration to place on the 2024 general election ballot. So to give a little bit of background in terms of constitutional authority for city charters, this comes from Article 8 of the Arizona Constitution. It's oftentimes referred to as your home rule provision. It gives authority for charters with a population of more than 3,500 people to adopt a city charter. And in the state of Arizona, we have 20 charter cities. Litchfield Park became the most recent one back in March of 2023. Once a charter is adopted, it's oftentimes known as the organic law of the city. It is the local constitution that the city follows. Now there is the method of being able to amend the charter, and it's a 3-step process. It's set out in section 903 of our charter. It's a proposal, a submission to the electors, and adoption. Now, the way that charter amendments are proposed, there are 3 different methods for that. The most popular being an ordinance coming from city council, ultimately making that decision to place something on the ballot. There's also an initiative, which the Mesa electors could do, as well as a report of a charter commission created by the city council through ordinance is the 3rd method that gets utilized, but that's not nearly as popular. Charter amendments have been approved in 14 separate elections since the founding of the Mesa Charter in 1967. We'll talk about this a little bit more, but generally speaking, the recommendation that would come from staff would be that we wouldn't recommend placing more than about 2 charter amendments on any given ballot. Part of that's because we've historically seen situations where 5 have been placed on the ballot, but only 2 were accepted and 3 were not. So we want to ensure that it's things that are important to the council that get on there and that we limit that number.
And so why are charter amendments recommended? There's plenty of reasons, mostly changes through the years of technology or process improvements, changes in state law that we want to better align with. And for instance, one of the things is that we have consolidated with Maricopa County elections since 2010. And so now we have some sections of our charter that we want to align with those procedures as well. And we keep notes throughout the year every time these things come up. And we keep notes in the charter and we kind of discuss those, what amendments may be needed. And each election year, we'll come to you with some of these options and let you decide which you want to do. So some of the amendments, after the discussions we've had with myself, the city manager, and the city attorney's office, we looked at those potential amendments that we have listed through the years, and we came up with these top 6 options for you today. Kelly and I are going to go through and we'll explain the current language of each of these sections and then what our proposed modification may be.
All right, so this morning, let's start off with redistricting. So redistricting, now I am doing it. Redistricting is the redrawing of district boundaries related to the 6 council districts for the city of Mesa. Now, just for reference in terms of how that process normally works, it takes place every 10 years. The last time was in 2021. A 5-person nonpartisan commission is appointed by the city council, and their job is to come up with a map that gets proposed to the city council. They take into consideration a lot of factors. Some of them are legally required, such as proportionality and population. Once that redistricting commission comes up with that map, they present it to the city council. City council has 2 options. They can either adopt it or reject it. If it gets rejected, the map is sent back to the redistricting commission to make a decision on that particular issue. They can either move it forward with the same suggestion as they did previously, or they can send it back to the council with some modifications. But in any event, if it's sent back to the city council is required by charter to adopt the redistricting map. Now, the suggestion that we're sending forward this morning is the requirement in the current language that the redrawing of district boundaries shall not remove the residence of an incumbent council member from the district he was elected to represent during his term of office. We have had the situation in the past where a council member who is in the last year of the last term that they're eligible for because they've served 2 consecutive terms on council, we'd have to take into account their particular residence and draw a sort of offshoot and modify the map because of that. So one of the recommendations we would send forward is if a council member is in their last year of the 2nd term that they would have been elected for, so they're not able to run again for 2 years, that we could not include their residence in the particular redistricting map. That would also require likely a change to another section of the code that requires that a council member live in their particular district for the duration of their term in office. But this would just be an additional modification that we would send forward to the council. The other thing I would, please, yes.
Would we have to make any other changes? Because currently it's 2 consecutive 4-year terms, and then you have to sit out 1 4-year term before you can run again. Is that section of the charter, any changes need to be made? Because if somebody's in District 6 and I get moved to District 5, do I still have to, that 4-year period, I still have to wait it out? Or do we need to make a change in that part?
Because he's going to just want to keep running, so.
I'm not going anywhere.
He's loving this.
I just wanted to use me as an example and not anybody else. But
That's a good point.
Right. We just want to make sure that the will of the voters back in the day is it should be two 4-year terms. Wait out a term before you come back, so you're not just switching districts.
We'll make sure that we'll double check that.
That was
and for the council members that were here when we did the redistricting, this actually topic came from council, right? This idea that we make this change to the charter so that we don't have sort of the situation where there's someone's termed out and we're having to sort of be creative in the lines to keep that person that's obviously not going to be running again. So, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I want to spend some time and just double check.
And it may be handled in the charter because what's to stop a council member from upping and moving and
exactly
doing it again?
I think the language already covers it, but I want to make sure, so I'm gonna double check.
Perfect.
And one of the things this morning we're going to talk to you about, just to give, and Councilmember Summers, you brought up wanting to know what the intent was originally. So we do have some history of the Mesa City Charter, and whenever we're looking legally at what was the legislative intent, the history is one of the things that's really important. So to give you some history on this particular section of the charter, and we'll talk about it for each of them. So the original intent actually of the freeholders of Mesa in 1967 was that there were no districts. Everyone was elected at large, including the mayor and all of the council members. This ultimately changed in 1998, so that's where the redistricting process and the actual council districts begin to appear in the city charter and how the elections got changed because of that.
All right, the next section is related to primary elections. The current language says that any candidate for the office of district council member who shall receive at the primary election the number of votes constituting a majority of all of the ballot votes cast for that office in that district shall be declared elected. And then a general election shall be held for those seats where no candidate was elected at the primary election. We're proposing to modify the language so that if there is less than 3 candidates that qualify for the election that year, that we can forgo the primary election and put the candidates on the general election ballot. And you'll see that there's a note on here that this proposal failed in the 2012 election. It was on the ballot in 2012 for this language to change, and it did fail by 51%, so not a very high percentage of failure. But that year, the ballot had 5 charter amendments on the ballot and 1 bond question. And so the first 3 items on the ballot passed and the last 3 failed, so it could have been voter fatigue. But the cost of the primary election has ranged from $72,000 to $142,000 in the past 10 years. And of those primary elections in those past 10 years, there were 7 elections, 4 of those didn't have more than 2 candidates, so those could have been dispensed and gone straight to a general election, saving a lot of money.
And in terms of the history on this particular measure, this particular portion of the charter has been amended twice, once in 1994 and once in 1998. 1994 was just to do a clarification. 1998 was to deal with the redistricting and the districts being created for the council members.
I have a question. So that, the cost of the primary election, is that's the cost to the city?
Correct.
Okay.
For the county.
The county, we have an agreement with the county, and they charge us 50 cents per registered voter. So it fluctuates based on the year on how many registered voters we have.
That's why you have a range there.
Yes. On presidential years, it's much higher.
It's what they charge us.
Okay.
And there's other costs. There's legal ads and other costs involved as well.
There's also kind of an awkward timing situation where sometimes, a lot of times people they'll become the council member or mayor-elect in August, and then for the next 6 months, you've got a shadow government, where you've got different, it's a little too long. That there needs to be certainly some time to ramp up and to make a transition, but it doesn't need to be that. It's kind of an awkwardly long period of time.
It is true, to his point, like they are elected they could be elected in August, they could be elected in November, but they don't take office until January.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
I mean, so we're
We've
very
all lived
familiar
this,
with it.
yeah.
But, yeah, are we, do the other municipalities do this? Just curious. Are we?
I'm not familiar. I
Okay.
have to look into that.
Yeah.
They appreciate having it over in
I
Well, there's that. too.
Yeah, it's nice to come.
If there was one of the races that had 3 people, you'd have to have the primary election then. And so, but then if you only had 2 in your race, you couldn't choose to be part of the primary. You'd have to still do the general election.
Well, the way we have it worded, it would be all of the races would have to have less than 3. Otherwise, you're having a primary anyway, you would just have the primary.
Oh, okay.
Even if one race had 3 and the other 2 races only had 2, all would be on the primary ballot.
Oh, they
It's
would
an
all be.
I
on.
wonder
So
if
you're
it-
still having the election.
yeah.
I see.
It's an
Well,
alternate.
right, because
Yeah.
that's what I'm wondering, is if, because Jen has had to go to the general election, but most of us haven't. So if one person, like we have this year, District 1 has more than 2 people, but none of the rest of it do. So, but we would all do the primary.
Right.
The motivation is cost savings, right? So, if you have to have a primary, then why not have a primary? But if you don't,
But you really wouldn't know until April 1st when signatures are turned in. You just wouldn't know how many candidates you have until April 1st, essentially. Because I think it's a little bit confusing to voters because then they don't know whether they're going to be voting for people in July or
That's a
in
good point.
November.
They're confused already by it.
Yeah.
At least
Yeah.
I've been asked.
I don't know.
Some years you have it, some years you don't. Might be a little.
Right.
But I guess it just requires more community outreach, so.
So if none of the elections
are more than 2 people, then
All of them?
the campaign, as far as the individuals running, would not cease until after the general. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's just,
As the campaign?
irregardless of the campaigns, yeah, but the election wouldn't happen until the
Yeah,
general election.
so just raise a little bit more money.
Gotta go drag it out for 3 more.
So this one may not be chosen.
Yeah, I'm reading the room on that
Well,
one.
a lot of good
yeah.
views on that.
So we'll switch topics. How about city council meetings? So section 209A of the charter requires that the council shall hold a regular meeting at least twice in every month. The suggestion that we would bring forward is to modify the requirement to account for council taking breaks, which most city councils do. What we would suggest is propose 2 meetings per month, except 2 months out of the year to hold 1, or as otherwise determined by the council. I will say that this language, as it's written, is what was in the original 1967 charter. The only change that has been made over the years has dealt with the notice, but the frequency of the meetings is the same as the freeholders has determined back then.
And do you know what other cities do on this one? Does anyone else have twice a year where they only have 1 meeting?
Not all cities have 2 meetings a month. A lot of
Oh,
cities
no,
have
okay.
just
Yeah.
1 a month.
I guess I just don't really know what other cities do. So I don't know what the public expects, right? I guess that's my
I don't know
question
the
on
public
this.
knows how often you meet. This is,
Yes, faithfully.
yes. And so the idea would be to
Janelle.
give us the flexibility, because we already do, we do this, we have to work around the 2 meetings per month to give the break in the summer and for Christmas. So we, go back-to-back meetings as early as we can, which is fine. But we want the flexibility that we decide we really only need to have 1 meeting in July or 1 meeting in December, we can do that.
Yeah, and so that was gonna be my other question is, I mean, it will just depend on what needs to be on our meeting agendas,
Right.
right? So if we did need to have the 2 at the beginning of December or whatever, could you still do that? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you.
Right, oh, yeah. if we
You can
decide-
have,
Yeah.
you can have
We-
3 meetings a month if you want.
Yeah.
Oh, why haven't we been, I'm just
Well,
kidding.
you-
Okay.
You're kind
well,
of
so
already
that's-
meeting
Yeah,
every week.
instead of, but I guess my thought was like trying to shove everything into 1 meeting with 6 presentations or something. If we needed to
That's up to
have
us.
2
We
meetings.
make that decision.
Okay.
Right.
The only caution there that I'd put on this one is I think we need to reach out to the development community because there have been everything from event liquor licenses to zoning cases and development agreements that have been pinched because of the summer break that we have. And
Yeah,
you know,
but we let them know months ahead of time, and those that they
Yeah.
know, especially development agreements, we tell them.
Yeah.
And we do it for planning, so that's why knowing this ahead of time, we put a schedule out a year in advance.
Sure.
Right, so everybody knows. So if this were to be approved, it would just show up on our annual calendar, so they'd have months' notice to know that.
Yeah, and some of those are self-made emergencies. I get it.
True.
So, but still, I would.
But it
bring this
doesn't
to the
preclude the
community, make
council
sure
from holding a meeting. It doesn't say you can't meet. It just gives it the flexibility. Right
The
now,
minimum.
we're required to
Yeah,
meet
okay.
twice a month.
All right.
So we're
Sounds
just giving ourselves the flexibility to make a different
Yeah,
decision.
I like the concept, and I think it helps with the calendar a little bit in the summer and around the holidays, Christmas.
All right, the next section is 211B1. It's related to ordinance posting requirements. The current language in the charter says that an introduced ordinance, we should post a copy in 3 public places and be published in the newspaper. And now the law has recently changed to say, we used to actually go and post these on bulletin boards in the public places. A few years ago, we changed it to install iPads in the 3 libraries, and so people can just click on the link in the iPad and it takes them to the introduced ordinances, which is helpful. But the law changed to say that now that we all have websites, we are required to post on our website and 1 public place. So our thought was we could modify the the language to say that we just mirror the state law, and then if an iPad were to break, we wouldn't have to replace that.
We can't do anything less than the state law requires, can we?
Correct.
Correct, but right now, the state law is actually more accommodating. to
Yeah.
current. It's the charter that's making us continue to do it the old way.
Okay.
Yeah, and Mayor, council members, I think that's partly because, 80 years ago when this was created, of course, we didn't have some of the options that we do now. So some of these little more specific issues can become dated over time, which is why we would suggest changing it in the charter. The original intent of the freeholders was that they just wanted to require publications of the ordinances once they were adopted. That was all that they've done. And we amended this once in 1992, but actually it just dealt with the introduction and adoption of ordinances and the process, because it used to be that that wasn't done over 2 meetings. It was done in 1 meeting, as long as the council members at their places of abode, I think is how it's stated, or receive a copy 72 hours in advance of the meeting. But otherwise, it was all done in 1 meeting. So this concept of posting has not changed, but just how we do the process has.
The next section is 703, and this relates to the form of ballots for ordinances and charter amendments. The current language really defines the language of our ballots, and even that there's squares for yes and no on the ballot. Since we consolidated with the Maricopa County elections in 2010, they design and print the ballots, so we just follow their procedures. We send them the information to put on the ballots in our language, and we have to follow their guidelines for that language. So we're requesting modification of this language just to be current with the election practices as they are today.
Of course, that whole debate could continue.
So currently, we're violating our ordinance, right? I guess the reason I say that is this might want to be the top of the list of,
So procedurally, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, procedurally, the way that the Supreme Court has looked at this is it matters of local, that are specifically just a matter of local concern would be something where the charter could differ from the state law. This, and so, for example, we've seen that with election dates, and Tucson is one of those examples, and there's very, very few of them. But something more administrative, like how the election, what the form looks like and procedures, things like that, are very unlikely to be deemed an issue of matter of local concern. So the courts would force us to do that anyway. So in terms of violating the charter, it's more of a nuance on that.
Okay.
Okay, so this will be the most legally nuanced one. So on this particular issue, we're talking about the withdrawal of a petition signature. So the current language, as it is written in the city charter, states that the petitioners, which would be the committee when there is an initiative for a charter amendment, when they propose to put one on the ballot and they collect the signatures, that they are permitted to withdraw the petition before the 15th day prior to the date of the scheduled vote on the specific amendment. What we would suggest is that a modification be made to bring this more in line with state statute. The way the state statute looks at this is that an individual person has the right to withdraw their signature once it's been filed, but not the committee in and of itself. So the petitioners in general couldn't do it, but each of us as an individual would have the right to do that. This is supported by the Arizona Supreme Court case of Powers versus Carpenter. I quoted it up there, but the thing that I want to point out is that the courts look at this as the right to sign a petition is a very personal privilege of the individual once they've been submitted. We also have an Attorney General opinion from 1984 that would support this, but there's also the practical aspects of this. If the petitioners came in 16 days before the election is supposed to take place, everything has been printed, mail-in ballots have been have already been submitted, especially to our servicemen and women overseas. This would create a bit of a logistical nightmare if someone attempted to do this. I don't believe this has happened in the past, but this is why our suggestion would be to go ahead and change this portion of the charter as well.
All right, so today we are looking for direction to ask if mayor and council has any preference to put one or more of these proposed charter amendments on the 2024 general election. If so, then I would work with the city attorney's office to draft the language for the ordinances, and those would be introduced on May 6th, adopted on May 20th, and as you know, the call of election is scheduled for June 3rd.
Maybe if I could just add for a little bit of context here, because I know you're excited about a lot of these, is that in the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about other questions that are going to be on the ballot. And so while there was always sort of the hope that we'd bring around 2 questions every 2 years to sort of, some of this was clean up and improve the charter, you also have to take it within the context of how many questions are already anticipated to be on the ballot, and maybe this isn't the time to put 2 more questions on. And so we want to give you that context here in just a couple seconds. But we also don't want to necessarily force you to have to make a decision today. In other words, if there were 1 or 2 of these that you would sort of highlight as a possibility, but you don't want to commit yet to say we're going to put it on, we could start working on that 1 or 2, and we could make that decision here in about a month or so, and we could be working on that language. So why don't we tell you what else is going to be on the ballot, and then that might answer our question. You might say, we already have too much, this isn't the year, come back in 2 years with this exciting program again, and we'll ask again. But if there is room for maybe 1 or 2, you think, you don't have to necessarily tell us for sure the 1 or 2, give us an indication so we can start working on it, because it takes a long time to write the language for the actual question. And we'll probably come back to you in a month or 2 and say, are you sure you want it on there?
So to give a little perspective on what the city of Mesa will be putting on the general election ballot this year, these 3 items have been brought to council before, and again, we will be bringing forward a lot more information about these in order to put these on a ballot. But permanent base adjustment, general plan, and general obligation bonds will all appear on the general election ballot for November 2024, and I will let Miranda speak a little bit more about other items.
Wait, before we go to the next slide, on the GO bonds, if you remember the presentation that Beth Heuning provided, she gave you 3 themes. Well, those themes are probably 3 questions, right? And so when you're seeing this slide, you should mentally go, that's probably 5 questions, not 3, right? And so you have 5 questions already. So that's just sort of the starting point, most probably, for the city. And now Miranda's going to tell you about things that the state's also going to put on.
Can I ask really quick, is there a specified order these have to be asked in on a ballot, or do we decide the order?
Well, the permanent base adjustment is number 1, and always in the expenditure limitation was number 1. The bonds are usually questions. So questions comes first before propositions. So usually those 3 questions, or however many number of questions for bonds would be first, and then propositions are the charter amendments. Those come last.
Okay, and so that's the order that has to go in.
Correct.
The questions, we decide the order of the questions too?
Yes.
And so when you were talking about the previous election that one failed on, that had 5 or 6 things on it, was it this type of 5 or 6 things, or was it 5 or 6 charter amendments?
It was a question first, that was the bond, and then the next 5 were charter amendments, propositions. And we can choose to change the order, I think, if we really wanted to. The county does give us the rights to argue that, but that's their typical lineup.
Yeah, if I would tell the council, well, we've always had, when we've done home rule, that's always been number 1.
Right, which is our choice.
Which is our choice. And so.
But our home rule, is that a proposition or a question?
Question.
Okay.
So permanent base adjustment.
Question 1, assuming that if we went with permanent base adjustment, that would be question 1. And that would be first on the ballot. And then then the bonds would be questions 2, 3, 4, whatever. And then propositions would follow that.
Where would general plan fall?
Well, that would be up to you to decide. We could make general plan number 2. I know we want to make permanent base number 1. General plan could possibly be number 2.
So general plan's a question?
We can choose the order of those questions.
But general plan is a question, not a proposition.
Mayor, the county gives us a lot of leeway on that, so we could actually decide. We could look historically as to where it fell and how we've asked it.
It's an interesting
previously.
question about between the general plan and permanent base adjustment. I don't know that we should just assume, when it's home rule, it is, obviously, because critically it determines the city's expenditure limitation on that date. The permanent base adjustment would be really nice to have. If it doesn't pass, 2 years from now, we come back with home rule. General plan, if it doesn't pass, it could have a material effect on development going forward to a certain degree.
Yeah, we'd come back.
Come
with the
back
general
again.
plan, and so, but the current general plan would just continue in effect.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
I'm confused on what even is the difference between a question and a proposition, and why it matters. Is it a psychology thing? Do people vote differently, whether it's a question or a proposal? Like, help me, I'm totally confused on why it matters and what it means. Who wants to answer?
I'm not sure why it matters, but I will say that I know last year, or our last election, the county actually said that most charter amendments are questions and not propositions, and we were requesting it to be a proposition because in the past, that's how we've always had it on the ballots, and we didn't really want to change that, and so they allowed us to do that, but typically that's not the way it's done.
But so if like people ask me what the difference is, I don't have a good answer?
Well, I can find
Nobody
an answer
does.
for you. Yeah.
No one knows?
This is our city clerk and she doesn't know.
Well, I don't get.
So theoretically, you could have 5 questions,
Okay.
right, on the ballot from the city of Mesa.
And that would be,
And then
we
that's
already have
before,
those
that's
5
before any
potentially.
charter questions. And then there's another slew of possibilities from the state. I don't know as a voter, they distinguish that. I think it's kind of an order and the way it's written. For us, I think going back to Jim's point, we're more concerned right now about the volume of options that are going to be on there. And, the further you get down the list, I think there's a, whatever political theory that is, you go further down, the likelihood of passing diminishes.
Right.
So, again, that's kind of part of this conversation right now that we wanted to share with the council so that we didn't want to not bring this to you and just make the assumption you didn't want to do it, but we wanted to say, hey, these are possibilities because this is the time to do it. But at the same time, I think there's some concern about the length of the ballot.
And questions are yes, no bubbles, and propositions are yes, no bubbles,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
And they explained, the ballot will explain, like, if yes, this is what's
Then this,
happening. If
okay.
no, this is what's.
That's right, okay.
Councilmember Spills right, they look very similar.
Yeah.
So even when we draft these, I remember the last time we were questioning, is it a question or a proposition and do we have to change the format? So for the voters to have that question is fair as well.
I'll just say that I think it'd be nice to avoid confusion wherever possible, and so if we can just have questions and eliminate propositions so that people go, oh, I need to look at this differently because it's a different, no, it's not. It's just a yes or no question on the ballot. So if we can avoid the confusion of questions versus propositions, I think that makes sense. Mr. Summers.
I have a question, or maybe,
Or is it a proposition?
or I might have a proposition. This slide speaks to it. There's some very important things that we're going to be placing before the voter. I think the permanent base adjustment is a critical question or proposition. General plan we have to do, and we're going to be going before the voters with GO bonds, and that the GO bonds is not just one bubble, it's multiple. It's parks and public safety, everything else. As much as I do like the changes in the charter, I don't think they're absolutely critical to have right now. We could change those later, maybe when there's a little bit quieter. We don't have 3 pages of bubbles to fill out. I think, like to Mr. Brady's point, that the longer this gets, the more suspicious the people get, and they'll probably vote no. I would be inclined to focus on what's absolutely critical right now on this election, and it's these 3 items right here, and we can work on the others down the road. That's just my opinion.
Is there an assumption that no matter, let's say you have 5 items, 7 items, that people will want to vote no on 1 or 2 just because they want to not say yes to everything? If there's the assumption that people want to vote no, then wouldn't a charter amendment of these are pretty benign? I don't know. It's an opportunity. If you wanted to vote a no, that you would just say, yeah, that redistricting thing or what, I'll do that one.
Well,
And I don't know. I don't know what the philosophy, I don't understand enough about what.
The psychology of it?
Yeah, the psychology.
Well, maybe we should just flip this to a different discussion, and with everything that we put out there, there's an educational component to it so that voters can make an informed decision whether they want it to or not. And I think to try to put 6, 8, 10 items on there, we're just not going to be able to dedicate the resources properly for voter education. And given how important these 3 items are to the future of Mesa, I think to focus that and focus all of our time on these items in public education does our voters justice, and we can move the other items for future debate.
Well, and Mayor, Councilmember Summers, to round out the discussion, I'd ask Miranda to go over the other measures that will be on the ballot that are coming from the state as well, just so you can see the volume that we'll be seeing in totality.
Does she know the difference between a proposition and a question?
Please.
Fair question, Mr. Summers. Mayor and council, thank you. I'm Miranda DeWitt, Government Relations Director. Kelly and Holly, thank you for letting me tag along today. Mr. Brady and Jim Smith have teed this up really well in that we do anticipate a very large number of measures on the statewide ballot, and it's important for you guys to have this information as you have been discussing, you know, over the last few moments, as you are contemplating and considering what you may want to send to the Mesa voters for consideration. I do not intend to go through all of these measures. It's been a long morning. I think the purpose of the slide is to let you know the totality of what we know today. And so working from the bottom up, you will note that there are already 5 measures confirmed to go on the ballot that were referred by the state legislature in the last legislative session. I will just note at the bottom, as you are all very familiar with, that Prop 479 will just be for Maricopa County voters. Currently in the 2024 legislative session, there have already been 2 measures referred directly to the voters. So that is certain. We will see a total of 7 as it stands today. We are probably halfway through the legislative session. I'm hoping maybe a little bit more than halfway. There is still an opportunity for them to refer additional measures. And then lastly, the citizen initiative process. There have been more than 12 initiatives filed. That's a lot. My understanding is that a lot of this 12 have been either coupled together or removed and won't move forward, but we don't have any certainty on the initiatives at this time. As you'll note, signatures are not due until summer, and so we are still in an uncertainty phase of the totality of the statewide ballot. But what we really want to emphasize to you today is that there will be a lot of measures for voters to consider this fall.
I think that goes to my point too, that maybe we should just focus on what's essential here and move the charter items, because we're going to follow state law, whatever the state law is. So if there's a conflict between state law and the charter, we follow state law, and we can fix all those things maybe when there's not so many things on the ballot. That would be my opinion on it, Mayor.
And it seems like none of these ballot measures are pressing time sensitive. I mean, obviously, the redistricting isn't.
No,
primary
they've been sitting,
elections,
some have been
maybe.
sitting there for a while, yeah.
So I would have to agree with Mr. Summers. I
Yeah.
think people are confused already, you know, a lot of times by all the measures that get put on a ballot. I think there's a high risk of, yes, just voting no once you get, you know, exhausted.
Even by the time that you get to our most important measures,
Yes.
it could be a long haul on the
The
ballot.
state ones always come before the city ones.
Oh, you mean
No,
on
for the-
those?
yeah,
Oh,
for
I don't
the
know. I
locals.
thought you meant the national elections.
No, well, no, just would.
I don't know the order of that, where that'll be.
You don't.
I'm
okay.
pretty sure that your local measures are first.
Become before all of this stuff. Okay, well, that's good at least.
Local comes before state. I mean,
So if we don't want one of these state ones to be passed, we should have more tomorrow.
probably
Just flip the whole thing.
top of the ballot might be President of the United States, right? And then.
Oh, okay.
And then, well, I mean, we don't get to decide. It is going to be the national questions, and then we're electing senators, and then, do we have any statewide offices this year? I can't.
Statewide.
No, okay, so following the federal questions would be City of Mesa questions?
I'm not sure. I'll have to check into that and why we have propositions and questions, and I'll get back to you.
There probably will be some, but there are always judges, it seems like.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Just to add to that.
County supervisor.
We have county supervisors that will be on the ballot. We will have a couple of seats on the Arizona Corporation Commission that are up statewide. We have 48 judicial retention questions that are on the ballot just in Maricopa County. So when you start layering that on top of everything that these ladies have already spoken to, it's everyone's predicting an unprecedented ballot length this cycle.
Okay. I have voter, voter fatigue already, just talking about it. Well, I thank you. Time for questions. I'll just underline what Mr. Summers said. I think these charter things are nice, but we have like 10 years to do it before we need to redistrict, and none of them are urgent. And, you know, as he indicated, state law will get us through this. And we do need to have a very serious discussion about the three questions, you know, the GO bonds, the general plan, and the permanent base. When we had the presentation on the GO bonds, there was nothing on there that I didn't love. So it's going to be very difficult, you know, to decide how to prioritize that. And we've got 2 of our 7 folks not participating in this meeting right now, so this is not the right time to make that decision. But I personally, would probably vote in favor of not addressing the charter questions in this election.
Okay, we just wanted to put it there, so.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, ladies. Next item, item 3 is to acknowledge receipt of committee and board meeting minutes. Is there a motion to that effect? Thank you, Ms. Spilsbury and Ms. Duff. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, that passes unanimously. Next is current events and conferences attended. Council members, anything you'd like to share with us? Ms. Spilsbury?
I have a really long list, so I'm trying to see what I should pick and choose off of here. It's been a busy week. Let's see, Friday at Mesa Can, they opened up an AT&T Learning Center, and I'm just so excited about that because it really supports a lot of our initiatives we're doing with our education workforce roundtable, and just really grateful for AT&T's partnership with the New Leaf and with City of Mesa to make that happen. Let's see, Sunday was the Aspire Academy graduation. It's our public safety experience for teenage girls. I think there were 35 of them, and Councilmember Duff and the mayor were there, and it was just really, really inspiring to see these girls be exposed to public safety careers and be super excited about it, and I just really loved that. Tuesday, I got to do a tour of the Early Child Care Center at MCC that they have in partnership with First Things First, and learn a little bit more about what's happening there and all the different ways First Things First is able to support different initiatives in the city of Mesa. So that was great. We're really lucky to have that there. I wanted to mention on Tuesday, Councilmember Duff and I attended the Women Leading Mesa networking event, and I don't know how many people were there, like 100 or something. I don't know. No one's here anymore.
I heard about 85, I heard about 85, 90.
Oh, okay. I mean, there were a lot of city employees there, and it was just really fun. It was a fun event to talk and network and get to know each other better. And I just love the events that group is doing to support the women in Mesa. And then yesterday morning, I want to acknowledge we had our City Employee Service Award breakfast for 5 and 10 years. We were all there and thanking our employees for their service, and really it just can't be said enough. We're so lucky to have who we have working for our city. And then yesterday also was the Meta's 2024 inaugural Community Action Grants reception, where they gave out $250,000 to about 12 organizations or so. And so I love that Meta, before their building's even finished, they are already jumping into our community and giving money to all these different nonprofits and schools and organizations. City of Mesa organizations benefited from that as well, our museums and stuff. So I just wanted to thank them. And then, yeah, my spring breakfast is this Saturday from 8 to 10 at Greenfield Park.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Duff.
Thank you for a good review, Julie. I was able to shorten my list. I appreciate that. On Friday, Noble Ground Coffee opened another location at Stapley and Baseline next to the theater, the AMC Theater. This is the second location within a month. One was at Stapley and Southern. They're a subsidiary of Goodwill. All the profits from the coffee shop go back into doing good for the community. And this is around, the reason they have this is for workforce development opportunities, completing the continuum of service to the community. On Saturday night, the mayor and me, and I don't know, and a number of other people were at the Arizona Forward Award Ceremony, and the Post, our community center in downtown Mesa, won an award for adaptive reuse. And so congratulations to all those who have worked very hard on it, and it is a gem in our community, and I'm so glad that we are able to have that recognition at the Arizona Forward event. And on Tuesday, I attended the ASU Smart Region Summit. It was fascinating and looking at cities and developments and how they will be affected with AI, doing digital twins and opportunities to be more data-driven in the way we do things. So that was good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Summers.
Thank you. I have actually a few upcoming meetings I want folks to be aware of. One is Art in the Park is going to happen at Augusta Ranch Park. That's tonight at 5 o'clock. Also tonight for Superstition Springs community at 6:30, there's a proposed development next to Monterey Park. I know that's attracted quite a bit of attention. They're going to, the developer's having a private or a public meeting that will occur at the Superstition Springs Elementary School from 6:30 to 7:30. So if you want your voices heard, please show up to that meeting. And then on this coming Wednesday, District 6 will have the first of the GEO bond, the general obligation bonds that we were talking about today. That meeting is going to be at Eastmark High School on Wednesday, right?
Open house.
Open house.
Open, so people know they can come.
It's an open house.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because it's not a scheduled
It's not
thing.
a
So it
meeting,
is, thank you. It is an open house, 6 to 7. I've heard a lot of community feedback about projects people be interested in. So this is your opportunity to come see what we're proposing and make some recommendations as well. So that again is Wednesday the 3rd at 6 p.m.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to mention real quick, I went to the Arizona Museum of Natural History, their volunteer appreciation breakfast, and that was a great event. Like the libraries, there are so many wonderful volunteers that spend a lot of time helping out the museum. So I think that the city did a good job of showing them some appreciation. So it was a great event. And then I'm sure you'll talk about the presentations.
Oh, thank
Mayor's
you.
Youth.
Mayor's Youth Committee, right? Thank you. We did have the Mayor's Youth Committee presentations. I know everybody enjoys being a part of this. I'm sorry not everyone got to, we didn't convene a city council meeting. Maybe we should do that next time. But these, for those who don't know, Mayor's Youth Committee does a great job of breaking up into small groups and then making presentations on suggestions for addressing challenges in our community. And these are always shockingly good. These very bright young people that do a great job in their presentation. And so that, thank you for the staff and council members that helped with that event just a day or two ago. I'll also, and I appreciate everyone, we obviously have had a busy week, and I appreciate being at a lot of the events that have been described earlier. One thing that wasn't mentioned, I was able last weekend to issue a proclamation supporting the 1 in 10 Fresh Brunch. This is an amazing event. I think it's the largest plated event in the state. It was about 1,800 people. Wow. Raised $1 million at that one event to support LGBT youth support programs. So very impressive and important event. And also last night attended a huge event at the Mesa Easter Pageant at the LDS Temple. We appreciate all the activity that the LDS Temple brings to downtown. Thousands of people were at that event over the course of the last week and a half. Many thousands of people came downtown, much like the Christmas lights. So
10,000 a night.
10,000 a night. Very impressive and a very quality presentation, regardless of your faith. I think you would enjoy participating in that event. Okay, Mr. Brady, what does our schedule of future events look like?
Thank you, Mayor. Let's go in order. This Friday, March 29th from 8 to 11 we'll have the Cesar Chavez Day, or unveiling a plaque there at Eagles Park. Again, that's from 8 to 11. It's a free, family-friendly event with food, inflatables, music, and so the grandson of Cesar Chavez will be there as we provide some remarks, but we're looking forward to unveiling a nice memorial plaque there on that site. So I invite everybody out to that. And then just a reminder to the council, we'll be doing early starts now on Mondays. So we will start at 4:45 p.m. study session on Monday, April 1st. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That concludes the items on our agenda for this meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Ms. Spilsbury and Mr. Summers. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. We are adjourned.